once, my ass.
I'm only 4. Bonjour, Monsieur Pussycat.
Cracking toast, Robert.
Start spreading the news.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the short podcast about short films. I'm your host, and we are discussing the Academy Award for Best Animated Short. Today's episode is about the third year of the award at the 7th Academy Awards, which celebrates the films of 1934. And let's give a warm welcome to today's guest, Owen Daly. Hello, Owen.
Hi.
Tell us, what is your familiarity with the Best Animated Short category?
My familiarity is more, I guess, in the modern times where being fully invested in the ceremony and its categories, I know more of the nominees. So I'm happy to be here to watch some films that I've not necessarily seen before, and also eventually listen to the podcast and find out a bit more about the short category, which is I do really enjoy the short categories being a thing and still continuing to be a thing, because short films can sometimes be even greater than the feature films that the Academy chooses to award.
Yes, that can certainly be the case sometimes. There's a lot of hidden gems down in these categories, and I'm glad to give you the opportunity to watch some older films that you might be unfamiliar with. Let's get into it. We have 3 nominees this year. Our first nominee and the year's winner is The Tortoise and the Hare, directed by Wilfred Jackson. This is the 5th nomination for Walt Disney and his 3rd win, winning the first 2 years of the category with Flowers and Trees and Three Little Pigs. This is also the 3rd win for the Silly Symphonies franchise, which, though originally intended to be about the combination of music and animation, became more focused on telling the stories of famous fables and fairy tales due to the success of Three Little Pigs the year before. If you are unfamiliar with the story, The Tortoise and the Hare depicts a race between the cocky and agile Max Hare against the humble and rather slow Toby Tortoise. And spoiler alert, Max Hare gets too confident that he slacks off during the race, and Toby Tortoise ends up winning. Owen, tell us what you thought of this short.
Yeah, as you said, it's a very familiar story. I would assume most people listening in or even familiar with the title alone, The Tortoise and the Hare, are familiar with the story.
Mm-hmm.
My main thoughts of it were it was really fun. I assumed that I've seen it before just based on familiarity with the story and just watching a lot of Disney films, whether short or feature films, from when I was younger. But no, I really enjoyed it, and I thought that the characters were well defined. Whether I ended up enjoying the presence of certain characters, like the Hare, I found annoying, but in the way that I felt was necessary for the story to be told.
Mm-hmm.
So no, it was really fun and zoomed by, and I had a great time with it.
Yeah, I felt pretty much the same way. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun, especially as you mentioned, like the characters are so well defined, especially the main 2, who it's just like last year I mentioned how Chuck Jones had said that the Three Little Pigs really they really defined their characters and made them like separate entities with full personalities, and I think this short does that even better than Three Little Pigs last year, because both Toby Tortoise and Max Hare are just such full characters and such a joy to watch as well. And yeah, it's just like you can really tell the personalities not just by the way they talk, and the way they move, especially like the slow kind of sheltered movements of the tortoise, which is obvious since he's a tortoise. It's like he's a very slow and sheltered person, person, I guess. And Max Hare, because he's the Hare of the story, they really emphasize how just quick and cocky is, that's just through the way he moves and all that. It's a very, very well done. And I and my main problem with the short, it's not much of a problem since I still did really like it, is just that it it kind of rests on the characters too much. Like, I know this is just meant to be a simple retelling of a popular fable, but it just kind of, I feel like it kind of goes on too long, even though it's only 8 minutes. uh we spend too long just like watching the rabbit like goof off and stuff, while the tortoise just kind of keeps trucking along and all that. And yeah, it it's an 8 minute short that should have been 5 minutes. No. And it's a minor complaint too. It's still short. um
Yeah,
any
I mean,
yeah.
like maybe I can kind of see what you're talking about when you say even for a short film it did feel slightly long, and I think maybe had they included the journey that the race was, to like the length of the race, maybe then we would have understood more so why they had to include those few minutes of him goofing off a bit long,
Mhm.
because of how long the actual trek was. So maybe that would could have been a solution too. But again, it's a short, so I don't think they were interested in adding any more to it.
Yeah, that could have been something actually, because like in the short it shows that the hare is kind of just pretending to like take a nap, just so that he can see like the tortoise like run up and past him, like just to let him catch up a bit before he like zooms off again. And it's just like, but I remember in the original, if I remember correctly, that is, like he just takes a nap because of how long the course is or something. And it's just, and then that's how partially how the tortoise catches up. And so yeah, it's just like that could have been something. uh Anything else that you want to discuss about this, or would you like to move on?
I mean, I think it's interesting to talk about how it's very noticeable how this Max Hare character shares a lot of similarities to Bugs Bunny, who would then be introduced 6 years later to the world.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah, I did read about that, how Max Hare was considered a potential inspiration for Bugs Bunny. And that is funny to think about. I just remembered how I wanted to talk about how uh that Bugs Bunny does have his own series of Tortoise and the Hare shorts, except I the tortoise in that one's named something else. I forget what it is. It's not Toby, it's something else. And those ones are just a kind of really funny retelling, because I think if I remember correctly, the tortoise cheats in that one. Like he's just a straight up fraud. And it's a great short. I wish that those would have been nominated, but Warner Brothers has a really weird history in this category. Or Looney Tunes, I guess. Bugs Bunny, especially, he only has 3 nominations, which is, weird considering he's one of the most famous characters in animation history. But, whatever. It's the Academy. They get things wrong sometimes. You can't expect them to know the future.
exactly. Even in these little short categories, they're never fully perfect.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on. Our second nominee is Holiday Land, directed by Sid Marcus. This is the first nomination for Charles Mintz in Screen Gems as part of the Color Rhapsody series. The short starts with a child who sounds like he's 40, who wishes that every day was a holiday. Then pages of the calendar fly off, and all these different figures from holidays come out, like Father Time for New Year's, Santa Claus for Christmas, and a witch for Halloween. Then they take the boy to the titular Holiday Land. Um, and I did not really care for this short. I thought the idea was a bit interesting, like for a little short film, just like, oh, you go to this little holiday land. It's just like, but nothing really happens in it. Like they just kind of go to the holiday land. You just kind of you're just kind of there for a bit, and then eventually the boy goes back to reality. It's a very light and airy kind of short. There isn't really much substance to it. It's just meant to be a something you could watch for a few minutes and then leave, I guess. It doesn't really, at least for me, it didn't really leave much of an impact. How about you?
Yeah, similar for myself. Um I just didn't really get the point, other than I guess, the short description of a person wishing it were a holiday every day. Um, Other than that, I don't think anything interesting is really done with it. I wasn't particularly impressed by the animation on
Mhm.
display. Yeah, it just barely registered with me, and I guess I'm glad I've seen another Academy Award nominated film.
Yeah, just
And
get something checked off the list.
yeah,
uh,
no, it was just rather inept and rather kind of lacking in overall.
yeah, and it's just like with the tropes and stuff, whenever you get uh something like this where a kid wishes something would happen, uh usually that's followed up with the kid realizing why such an idea would be bad. Like what, like you would, like for something like this where he wishes every day was a holiday, you'd expect like him to get bored with the idea of holidays or something, or is that just like he gets that's so sick of eating turkey every day or something like that. But no, it doesn't do that. It doesn't do anything. It's just you watch the kid walk through the land, and then there's some songs, and then it's over. He goes back to reality, and he has to go to school, except at the very last thing of short before he goes off to school, he gets back into bed, goes to sleep, and it ends. It's just a very it seems a bit like a missed opportunity for something of substance when they just kind of decided, no.
Yeah, I mean, I almost wonder were it an actual feature length feature, could something much more darker and much more kind of, because the concept is such an interesting thing to think about, and I think it's maybe had they expanded it to something feature length, that it could have been a much more interesting feature. And even just the thought of the holidays that they chose for the film. I mean, obviously, since 1934, there have been thousands of more holidays in the calendar. So there's a lot of prospects to maybe revisiting this story at a feature length, or even, I don't know. I just had that thought that maybe the rare short needs to be expanded.
Maybe, like, yeah, it just needs a plot of some kind to be added to it. uh, but yeah, like I was kind of thinking about something like Nightmare Before Christmas while I was watching it, just thinking like, or maybe just I was just imagining like what would happen if the kid went to like Halloween Town or something. I don't know. Uh, but yeah, it and also you saying that just like there's been lots more holidays. I'm just thinking it's just like if he goes to the lands of like the kind of bullshit Twitter holidays where it's just like National Hot Dog Day or something like that. I just funny idea. Uh, and I can sense that we have run out of things to say about this short, unless you have something that you can pull out of your ass. Uh,
I mean, the thought about expanding it was the only thing that I could pull from my main reaction to it.
all right. So our third and final nominee is Jolly Little Elves, directed by Manuel Moreno and Bill Nolan. This is the second nomination for Walter Lantz and is about a cobbler and his wife who find a little elf knocking on the window asking for food. They oblige him and the elf leaves, but comes back with a bunch of other elves while the couple sleeps to make them a bunch of shoes for them. The couple then becomes rich off the elves' labor as they come back every night to make more shoes. Uh, Owen, what do you think of our final short?
Um, I don't know how to react to this one. I'm very disturbed by a lot of it. Um, I the dunking song, first of all,
Dun, dun, dun.
um, really kind of threw me for a loop. And yeah, I especially when there's shots of these very creepy little elves polishing the shoes, and I don't know. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Maybe hearing your opinions might shed a bit of light on how I actually feel about it.
So I kind of hated this. For first of all, like the story itself, as on a base level, is fine, I guess, but I just found the whole experience so kind of irritating. Like, I didn't really care for the things that they were showing me. Like with Holiday Land, I even though I didn't really like that, I thought it was kind of pointless. I still found myself kind of enjoying like the animation, the colors, and stuff. But for this, it's just I couldn't really find anything to like. Like the dunking song, which they sing twice and is more his annoying both times, just fucking grates my ears. Uh, and then I found like so the first part of the story is that the cobbler and his wife, they help out this hungry elf, and then then the elf, and thanks for that, they go and make a bunch of shoes so that the cobbler doesn't have to do any work for that day, and then they sell the shoes and become rich. uh, and that part's fine, but then it keeps going. And it's just like the cobbler and his wife exploit the labor of these elves every single night and get rich off of their unpaid labor, which is almost slavery if it weren't for the fact that the elves willingly choose to do this. And then after what I assume is like years of them exploiting their labor, they finally get the idea to give them some kind of compensation for it. It just like they like you would think that like they'd want to portray these people in a kind light, but no, they just happily accept this free labor. And then after years they're just like, let's pay them. But no, they don't pay them in the riches that they've earned, they pay them in donuts. They just give them more donuts to dunk into coffee. It's just like, what am I supposed to get from this? Because it ends right after that. This is like
yeah, absolutely. It's quite an odd. I was not expecting going into this to have to be kind of given a tutorial on how to properly dunk a donut into coffee.
twice.
Twice, yes, twice. Yeah, I'm not the biggest fan of it. I also have questions about when did the couple find out that the shoes had been made by the elves? Did they know from the beginning? Did they just think it was a miracle? Maybe that question. I would have loved that question answered.
Oh yeah, I just remember that. It's like because the elves always do it while they're asleep. It's just like, and it's just like they have. I assume they haven't interacted with the elves at all until that last until the last scene when they finally quote unquote pay them. But yeah, I wonder if they just known all along and just didn't want to say anything. I don't know. Yeah, it's a very odd short.
Yeah, it's not even like, again, there's not even that great animation
Yeah.
to it, because sometimes I can be forgiving of a story lacking any great values if there's some stupendous animation there, but this is just kind of regular hand-drawn animation. First of all, the donuts look very unappealing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I understand the first one being unappealing because it's stale and it's the only piece of food they have. But at the end, when they revisit the dunking story, these people are rich, and can they not afford better drawn donuts to dunk?
I mean, maybe that's just how donuts were back in the 1930s.
I guess so.
But I did notice how like in the first scene when they share the donut with the elf, it's like he cracks it and there's an audible snap when he like separates the donut. It's just like, oh, that's a bad donut.
Yeah, and also he gives half the donut to the elf and then splits the other half between him and his wife. So I guess he's just really caring person.
At least at the start.
Yeah.
I guess the sharing was just a one-time thing. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we've run through this. So why don't we go to our ranks of the three nominees? And since there's only three, it shouldn't be too hard to rank them. Why don't you start us off with your number 3, Owen?
Yeah, so my number three is Holidayland. The reason I'd rank it third is just because I just didn't care. I had no kind of strong feelings towards the story, and there wasn't that much great animation on display. And then do you want me to say my number two or?
I'll do my number three. I was just going to let you talk. Um, my number three is Jolly Little Elves, which I made clear how much I really just don't care for it. And like you said, the animation's nothing to write home about. It's a very generic kind of story, and just I don't know, it just pisses me off for some reason. I can't really understand why this story specifically makes me mad. It just does. You're number two.
My number two is Jolly Little Elves. And while I've ranked Jolly Little Elves and Holidayland 2 and 3, I'm not that um defined in my ranking. I could easily swap either of them between 2 and 3. They're just, but speaking of Jolly Little Elves, I'm just really still disturbed by the story, and I'm questioning a lot of the filming choices and plot holes. If you can somehow have plot holes in a film that's only 8 minutes long.
Yeah. Um, my number two is Holidayland, which while I still don't like it, uh, I did find myself at least somewhat enchanted by the titular Holidayland. Like I did enjoy uh, like just seeing it, but I would have also enjoyed more of a plot to it, or at least some kind of lesson or moral, even, which isn't much, but it's something. And now I guess we can agree that both of our number ones is the Tortoise and the Hare, which also is the winner of the year.
Yeah, it's not really a close competition at all. Um, the Tortoise and the Hare, while not while not the greatest animated short I've ever seen, is head and shoulders above its co-nominees. It actually has a story that you can completely follow. There's some really good animation there. I especially found enjoyment in how the film used the tortoise character, how he kind of stretched his body, whether it was his limbs, just like in these wildly imaginative ways. It had very clearly defined characters, which is something the other two didn't have. So my choice of it as number one is pretty easy to think about.
Exactly. My thoughts are the same. It's just a very well done short. And I'm glad that you pointed out how the tortoise stretches. I really love the bit at the end, like as the race is coming to a close, when the tortoise like extends his legs and starts full on sprinting to try and stay ahead of the rabbit. Um, but yeah, it's just very well animated, very well done, and it's a competent story with a beginning, middle, and end, which is apparently a high bar now. And yeah, it's just a good short that has also kind of lasted the test of time, unlike its co-nominees.
Mhm.
So now we've gone off. And before we end our show, are there any final thoughts you'd like to share, Owen, or anything you'd like to promote?
Um, yeah, I'm just thank you for having me here. While the films we were discussing weren't necessarily my favorite of all time, um, I'm, as I said earlier, happy to fill a blind spot in some of the films from the anime category that I've not seen before. Um, and somehow we've managed to find the time to talk longer than the films itself, which is something I didn't expect of short films, especially. um, and I guess in terms of where you can find me, I usually spend most of my time on Twitter, just talking about films. I've um, done podcasts with other people like yourself with Zeta or something like that. So if you ever want to hear me talk about film, just follow me on Twitter.
uh yeah, it's been a theme with our episodes that it ends up being around as long as the shorts themselves combined, right? It's like it's very interesting that it ends up that way, but you know short podcasts, short films, uh and yeah, everyone who's listening, go follow Owen on Twitter and on Letterboxd, And also thank you, Owen, for coming on the show. Thank you, listener, for tuning in. This has been the short podcast about short films. Until next time, goodbye.